everybody, and welcome to the Thursday, or as it's better named, the Friday Eve edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Hope you're having a fantastic day, and I'm very glad that you're able to spend some time with us today as we get you into the latter half of the work week and then into another weekend. And it is just bizarre to me how short weeks, right? When you have and I know not all of you had a long weekend, but a majority of you did, always seem like they're so long, right? You lose that Monday. If you're anything like me, all the Monday stuff gets jammed into Tuesday, and that floats into Wednesday, and it just feels like these weeks are extremely long. But anyway, the weather cooperating out there. It was a rather lovely drive in this morning, and looks like a mix of sun and cloud and temperatures that are bearable. We certainly could be worse. It certainly could be worse. If you've been watching some of the goings-on in Ontario, I know you're all saying, well, good on Toronto for getting more snow. I have to agree. But they're dealing with snowstorms. I was talking with some family back home in northern Ontario, dealing with 25 to 35 centimeters there. So winter's not over, folks, but it is nice to get a little bit of a break, isn't it? Anyway, don't forget, Alistair Alders, our meteorologist, will be here tomorrow to set up the weekend forecast and take a look at this. There's been some discussion about another system forming somewhere down south and working its way up here. We'll get the very latest on that. It's still way too. It's not even formed yet. So we'll wait till tomorrow till we take a look at that and see if that's going to impact our weather in the latter half of the weekend and into early next week. You can't go anywhere today where there are people gathered that are not talking about that hockey game yesterday. Did you watch it? We certainly did here. The newsroom, when I got off the air at 1 o'clock, was full of people, and everybody was on the edge of their seat, so to speak, when Team Canada went down a goal and then tied it and down another goal and then tied it, and then we went to overtime, and Mitch Marner, who you all know has certainly faced his share of criticism about his performance in big games, came through for Canada and on a beauty. I don't even know how other than to describe it, to use Don Cherry's vernacular. It was a beaut, and a little backhander on top shelf, and Canada's now into the semifinals and will play the Finns, and that game's coming up. So I know that many of you are looking forward to that. The bigger story that came out of that game, well, the win was the biggest story, but a big story that came out of that game was Sidney Crosby, who left the game early due to injury and what was an ugly-looking collision and hit. Kind of limped to the bench and then limped down the hall, and we never saw him return to the bench. So many were speculating, like, is he done? Is it over? I understand MRIs are being had. Coach Cooper today not ruling out Sidney, saying he's day to day. So hopefully the injury isn't as severe as it looked, at least on television, and we see Sidney back, because he certainly is the heart of that team, I will say. And let's not forget that Canada's women's team is getting set to go for gold today. They'll play the United States. That game goes at 2 o'clock Atlantic time, and the women, I know, will be ready for that. But it's a big hill to climb, and we saw the American team dominate Canada in the round robin of the tournament. I think the final score was 5-0. And to be honest, the rivalry series as of late, the U.S. has dominated that as well. So the Canadian women in tough, but when it comes to gold medal games and women's hockey, the Canadian women tend to step up their game, and I think it's going to be a good one to watch. And I'm going to rush home right after the show today to do that, because I think all the support we can send to them will certainly be welcomed and warranted. Rachel Hollman is in a must-win situation right now. She's on the ice against South Korea. If she wins, as I understand it, she's in the playoffs. And she'll join Brad Jacobs, who is already qualified for the playoff round in curling. So we'll keep our eye on that as well. So lots happening in Milan Cortina. Should anything change, should anything happen during the show, we will do our best to bring that to you here on the show. The other big news story of the day today is the arrest of the former Prince Andrew. Was he Mountbatten something now? Windsor has been arrested in connection with the release of the latest batch of Epstein files. The British authorities finding enough evidence, I guess, in these files to at least warrant an arrest and an investigation into Prince Andrew. We don't know a whole lot about sort of what this means. I know he was still in custody earlier this morning, so it will be an interesting day, at least in the UK and in Britain, to watch the reaction of the folks there and the royal family as Prince Andrew again in the top. And this is going to, folks, this is going to be all over the headlines there for months now. It leads me to a question, and the Epstein files has certainly been a talking point, and everybody has certainly their opinion on the Epstein files. There are lots of people, lots of names that have come out of the Epstein files, some of them with a really close connection, at least an alleged close connection with Prince Andrew, and others with a sort of periphery connection to Epstein. Do you think it's to the point now that this is serious enough that we need some kind of, and I don't even know what form it takes, because if we're going to rely on governments of different countries to investigate these things, there are certainly conflicts there, right? Do you think that the Epstein files are serious enough to warrant some sort of international commission to take a look at these things, to see how much influence this guy had on governments, on decision making, regardless of political stripe, regardless of political affiliation, no matter even if it's if it's to the business world? This guy certainly was an influence peddler. There's no doubt. In addition to all of the other things that are well known about Jeffrey Epstein and his island and his charges and all of that. Do you think that it's time that we have some kind of international tribunal, commission, whatever you want to call it, to take a look at these files? Because I think that it's to the point now that there are some serious allegations being leveled against a lot of people. Some very well may be warranted, others maybe not. And I think the really only way to get all of the information out there is to have some kind of judicial process to take a look at these files, something you might want to talk about when we open up the telephone lines today at 11 o'clock. Houston government, again, is being chastised for overspending, and now we're firing back at some of the allegations that have been raised by people like the Auditor General and the opposition parties. The Deputy Minister of the Finance Department in the province is defending the Houston government's over-budget spending, and we're to the point where it's more than, almost $7 billion has been spent outside the budgeting process. That means it doesn't have the scrutiny of the legislature. The Auditor General not happy with that at all and is asking that the law be amended to require the legislature to authorize all spending that's not included in the budget. Let's not forget that we are getting ready to go back to work at the legislature. February 23rd is the resumption of proceedings at the legislature, likely to be followed very closely by a budget. And if you've been following any of the news with budgets around the Maritimes and in Atlantic Canada, you know that Nova Scotia is not alone in having what I would consider to be obscene amounts of deficit spending that are happening. New Brunswick reporting, was it $1.2 billion? It's over $1 billion anyway in deficit spending this time around. The last time we got a look at the books here in Nova Scotia, we're at $1.4 billion. When the Premier was sitting in the studio with me when we had our last discussion, he didn't really commit to a number, but he suggested that it will be over $1 billion this time around, which is I don't think we fathom how big a number that is. Like $1 billion is a lot of money, and that is all money that we're borrowing, right? And it just seems to be that it's the government way now. We just, whatever, we'll just spend her, right? But what we don't often hear and we don't focus on is the fact that a good chunk of the money that you pay in your paycheck and your taxes every year goes to just cover the interest payments on that debt, right? So before we build a road or we fix a hospital or we build a school or we do whatever we do here in the province, a good chunk of your money is going to pay off the interest on that debt. And it doesn't seem like that's getting any better. Also something you might want to talk about when we open up the telephone lines here on the show, and that's going to happen again right after 11 o'clock today. I got to tell you, I always say, and I haven't yet today, and I'll do it now, that Vanessa Van Inez is behind the glass, and she does a fantastic job putting things together and amazing me on a daily basis. She really does, right? I don't know if you've heard the ads or you've seen any of the promotion, but you know that the Canadian rock and roll band Triumph is going back on tour right after 30 years. The lineup is back, and they're touring as Triumph. And bringing some special people along with them as well. But and they're going to play a show here in April. And I have to tell you that and I was just joking with my colleagues from Jack 92.9 before we came on the air, and I said, the preteen Dan is pretty giddy today, because I always say that Vanessa is a miracle worker, and she truly is, folks. She really is. And when this tour was announced and the dates were announced, and we learned that Scotiabank Centre was going to get a date, I said to her, well, let's see if we can get Rik Emmett, the singer and guitar player from Triumph, on the show, right? I've been a fan of Triumph since 1979. I know they had albums out before that, but I was first exposed to them in 1979. And it's very interesting that I had that album, right? It's Only a Game, right? Was one of the albums that was always on the top of my pile, and I wore that thing out. I listened to it a lot, and I've been a big fan of Triumph and of Rik Emmett from over the years, even after he left and the band went on hiatus, and I think it was 1993. And then when they came back last year remember the stuff at the Stanley Cup they did? That was one of those misty moments for Dan when he saw that. So Rik Emmett's going to join the show today, folks, and I'm pretty excited, as you might be able to tell. And we're going to do that just before 1 o'clock today. So make sure that you're sticking around for that if you're a fan of Triumph and a fan of Rik Emmett's. And we're going to have a conversation with, I know the name, the title gets thrown around a lot, but if there's a definition of a Canadian rock and roll legend, it's Rik Emmett. There is no doubt about that. And I'm really looking forward to that conversation. That's going to happen in hour number 3 today. We're going to stop and take our first break here on the program. And when we come back, we'll have a conversation with our friend from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. And that's Devin Drover, who is going to join the show. We know the New Brunswick deficit's at $1.3 billion. Nova Scotia's last reported deficit was $1.4 billion. What's it going to be this time around? And his thoughts on all this money that we're spending on interest payments. Devin Drover will be your guest when we return. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Happy Thursday. We're back after the break. Well, it appears to be budget season, at least on the provincial level here in the Maritimes, and Nova Scotia, no doubt, will be delivering a budget here before the end of the month, and our friends across the border in New Brunswick have already done so and released the budget with what's being called an unprecedented $1.3 billion provincial deficit. That's more than double what that government had originally projected, and it seems to be the way these days, for lack of a better term. It appears that these budgets and these deficits are just absolutely swelling in all of the maritime provinces, and I would suspect that that's going to continue right across the country. And it makes one wonder, when do we get to a point where we can't borrow any more money? Very pleased to welcome back to the show from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation, Devin Drover. Devin, how are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me.
We have a problem with our credit card, don't we?
Oh, absolutely. Nova Scotia's finances are out of control. And as you said, at some point, things have got to change. We can't go on borrowing forever.
What I think gets lost, and I mentioned this in the preamble, Devin, is that, we talk of these numbers. I don't think Nova Scotians generally understand how much $1.4 billion is, and don't understand that when we borrow that kind of money to pay for some of these expenditures that the Premier's announcing, that, we have to pay the interest on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, it is often abstract for somebody to hear about government borrowing more money. But then you got to think about the interest debt numbers and then also what that means per every Nova Scotian. So last year, Nova Scotians paid more than $1.1 billion on interest alone. But if you break that down for every man, woman, and child in the province, that's $1,150. So basically the first over $1,000 someone pays in their taxes every year just, is taken out of your pockets and wasted on financing government overspending. It's not $1,000 going towards healthcare. It's not going towards education. It's not going towards critical infrastructure. It's not going to fixing the roads and your sewer system. That is just going towards big government debt. So it is really outstanding. And when you're seeing now, the Houston government last month said that the deficit this year, the borrowing numbers this year is about $1.4 billion. It was up. That's up from initially expected, and it's been going up all year round. It's showing that this is a serious problem, and it's going to have impacts, not just for government, but for every average Nova Scotian resident. So it's crazy right now.
Devin, are we already past the point of no return? And the reason I ask that is the Premier was in here a couple weeks ago, and I asked him about the budget, and he said, look, Nova Scotians need these things, right? And we're gonna give them to them, and spending be damned, sort of. But now, if we were to try and rein in this kind of spending, it would be a serious bunch of cuts that would be needed, wouldn't it?
Well, not necessarily. So, I think it's really we have to look at where we're cutting. And, government spending is at record levels in the province, and it's been growing rapidly. But it's not just in the areas that I would say the Houston government has made a core priority. So when they won their first mandate in 2021, Premier Houston talked a lot about fixing healthcare. But if you look at the numbers now, about 60% of new spending isn't going towards healthcare. So, its government has expanded essentially everywhere since 2021. And, I think even if we just rolled back spending to where we were a few years ago, I don't think for a lot of Nova Scotians, they think the services they've been getting, especially outside of healthcare, is any better than it was 5 years ago. So I think, there's really government needs to look at areas where government has expanded and they've not seen, any improved efficiencies and, looking at rolling back that. And, it's not just, the Canadian Taxpayers Federation and advocates like us that have been raising this as an issue. We've saw a credit rating agency, S&P Global, one of the big credit agencies, recently downgrade Nova Scotia's credit rating. And they did it because they said that the province's finances aren't as strong as they should be and that they continue overspending. So, I think we're seeing, a lot of increased spending in Nova Scotia. And I don't think we're seeing increased performance out of this government, outside of potentially in healthcare. So I think we really need to kind of look under the hood in government and see where Houston can find savings, to improve the province's finances such that we're not borrowing money year after year.
Devin, not only do we have a problem with the credit card, it seems that the Houston government has a problem asking if it's a good thing to buy something on the credit card. We've seen numbers from the Auditor General since 2020 that the Houston government spent well over $6 billion, 6.7 I think is the number, $1 billion outside the budget process, just going out and spending it.
Yeah, that raises serious transparency concerns and accountability concerns when, the budget is supposed to be the real understanding of what the province's finances are going to look like for a year. It's why they gather hundreds of stakeholders in a room for the budget announcement where, you have an opportunity to meet with officials and get that information. So when stakeholders are being told one thing and then money's being spent outside the budget, I think it raises serious transparency and accountability concerns. And, at the end of the day, we're going to need to find ways to spend less. And part of that needs to be reducing any spending towards what's actually going on in the budget. And, of course, there'll always be special exceptions to that like we saw during COVID or dealing with a natural disaster. But outside of that, all routine spending needs to go through the budget process. That's what's voted on by the House, by the legislature. That's what that's where we see that transparency. And when we lose that, it really strikes at the core of our democratic system.
Devin, we know that the Ledge here in Nova Scotia is coming back to work on the 23rd. There's likely to be a budget in the days after that. What are you expecting to see in the budget this time around?
So, there's two things there. What am I expected to see and what would I like to see? I think what I'm expecting to see is some minor adjustments. I think there will be some effort by the minister, and he's said as much, to reduce the size potentially of the public service to better reflect the tough economic times we're in. And I hope to see that. I really hope to see the government start to align, the public sector to be more in line with the public sector and, find those efficiencies. I don't think we're going to see a lot in the way of tax relief in this budget. The Houston government, to their credit, did a good tax cut friendly budget last year. So I don't suspect we'll see that. But I do hope to see some reduction in spending, including, potentially getting rid of inefficiencies that exist in the public sector.
It's interesting. I wonder, Tim Houston, the accountant, if he was the one who was going to take a look at the province's books, what he would say at this point, right? Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it doesn't take and it shouldn't even take an accountant. If you think about the average family, if you see your bills going up month after month, but the income you're getting is staying the same or going down, you're going to have to trim something. You're going to have to find efficiency. So it's surprising to me that common sense is lost. And yeah, we've seen it, as you mentioned earlier, in New Brunswick as well. It's not rocket science. When a Nova Scotian family is struggling, they find ways to either to reduce their spending or to find things to make their life more affordable. We're not seeing that at the provincial level right now, where they're just racking up more spending year after year, month after month, and, kicking the can down the road. And all these, we should never forget all these discussions about government debt and, deficits. All this means in the future, when we keep running them, is they're going to have to, the interest charges are going to go up, and people are going to have to be faced with either two things, and that's service cuts or tax increases. And I don't think the average Nova Scotian is looking for either right now.
And no real roadmap to balancing the budget. In fact, when the New Brunswick finance minister released the budget this week, he said that, I don't know if we're going to be able to bring it back to balance within the next 4 years.
Yeah, so the province originally, I think in the last budget here in Nova Scotia, estimated that they were planning to keep adding billions in debt through 2028-29, and then potentially there being a balanced budget after that. I think we've completely seen that. Basically they're completely off course trajectory now and returning to a balanced budget. So, I'd like to see Nova Scotians or the Nova Scotia government really start to turn their mind to this. I think, if you talk to the average Nova Scotian, they understand that more and more of their tax dollars are being zapped by big government interests rather than being used towards things they care about. And, we have to call a spade with this government. It's not just increased spending on healthcare. It's a lot of new spending going towards everything, even outside of kind of what the Houston government has dubbed their core priorities.
Devin, I'm sure you'll be watching the proceedings at the legislature next week as closely as we will, and look forward to chatting with you in the future.
Yes, thanks so much.
Devin Drover from the Canadian Taxpayers Federation. 23rd of February is the date that has been circled on the calendar for the resumption of events, a resumption of proceedings at the provincial legislature. And I would imagine the budget will be very close around that date as we look to see what the spending plan, at least what the budgeted spending plan is for the Houston government when that happens. Going to take our next break here on the program. Blake's going to update us on what's going on in the news. And on the other side of it, a screening program for your lungs is finding dozens of cancer cases in just 2 years in effect. A conversation with the medical director of Nova Scotia Health's lung screening program when we return. All right, welcome back as we Roll along here on a Thursday. I had misinformed you all that we were going to have a conversation about lung screening. That isn't happening till tomorrow, so that's my bad. I apologize, but I hope you can stick around. It's a very fascinating interview. We're going to do that one on Friday, so I'm looking forward to that. We, of course, saw yesterday the latest twist. Is it a twist? In the ongoing saga that is federal politics these days. And we saw another member of the Conservative caucus, albeit on the fringes of the Conservative caucus. This is a very bizarre story, and that's the story of Matt Jeneroux, who had already said that he was maybe had enough and that he was going to leave the caucus at the next available juncture, the next available station on the train, I guess. And then yesterday we see that, nope, he's going to cross the floor and switch teams and put on the red tie instead of the blue tie. And this is the third member of the Conservative caucus, of course, led by Pierre Poilievre, who has crossed the floor since the last election. And there is a lot of speculation out there that there may be more. And we've been hearing that since the outset, right? This all began with Mr. D'Entremont down in South Shore, right, down the Yarmouth County way. He was the first to go, and then we've seen others since. And this can't be sitting well with Pierre Poilievre, right? He's just come off of his leadership challenge, if that's what that was, and has been re-cemented as the leader of the Conservative Party moving forward. And in the wake of that, we see another floor crossing. It's got to be difficult times in the Conservative Party, and it's got to be difficult times in the Conservative caucus with Mark Carney. At least the likability of Mark Carney soaring in the polls. He's over 50%. The last poll I saw. The Conservatives, Liberals are close when it comes to voter intention, but that kind of is the way it always is, right? We saw just before the election and before Mark Carney's ascension to the leader that the Conservatives were enjoying a rather large gap in popularity. It was well over 20 points. That's no longer the case. That wasn't the case during the last election. And with the continued turmoil that's happening within the Conservative Party, I would imagine that the caucus meetings and the conversations are a little bit different when it comes to that now. I'm still not a fan of floor crossings. I know we had a rather robust discussion about this when Mr. D'Entremont switched sides. I'm just not a fan of floor crossings. I understand that they are part of the political system, and I understand that it's been happening for many, many years here in Canada, but it doesn't mean that it's right. I don't think that you are representing the wishes of your constituents when you do that. I think that people, and I know many of you will disagree with me, and it might be something we bring up at the open hour today, but I think that many people at the federal level vote for a leader or a party instead of the person when it comes to federal politics. I know some of you may not, and that's fair ball. But I'm going to suggest a good chunk of the people that cast ballots in a federal election are voting for the leader or at least for the party as opposed to the person that's representing it in the constituency. And when somebody takes those votes and goes to Ottawa and wins an election and then decides that they no longer can stomach or can't play on that team anymore or whatever the reason is behind it, or are inspired by the leader of the other party, which is weird to me, but anyway, then they can just walk across the floor and now those votes that were cast for a Conservative in this case are now in the Liberal caucus, and that just doesn't make sense to me. And I understand that there's a cost that's associated with having elections. I understand that there's an apathy amongst voters at the best of times. And if we're going to have by-elections because of these decisions, then voter apathy is going to get on the increase. But it just doesn't feel like this is what democracy should look like to me. This is something that it just feels like there's some power brokering that's going on behind the scenes, right? We haven't really heard of what's been offered or any perks or benefits that have been handed to any of these, if any, to any of these people who have crossed the floor. But it feels like this is why people don't like politics. It feels to me like this is why people think that politicians are corrupt. Because this is not a transparent process at all. I mean, how many of these meetings are going on right now? Are these those something you'd see out of a spy movie where there's a meeting at a park on a park bench and papers are passed back and forth or promises are made? Or is this the case of a disgruntled MP that's walking into a whip's office or into a leader's office or maybe even into the prime minister's office and saying, "Hey, I'm disenfranchised and I no longer want to be a conservative," or vice versa. Mark Carney now, I think, 2 seats away from a majority in the House of Commons, and I think until that happens, we are going to see this kind of, I don't want to call it arm twisting, but I think that it's there'll be some discussions and some meetings that are had with those that are believed to be on the outside or at least on the edges of the Conservative caucus at this point. What I do think happened yesterday when Mr. Jeneroux crossed the floor was that he ended the speculation that we're going to have a spring election. I said it from the outset that I didn't think that was ever going to be a possibility. I think that this and props to my colleagues in Ottawa that this is their job, but it feels like this is some writers that are ramping this up to try and get some articles written. It really never really came from anywhere. It just felt, it wasn't that there was one party that was demanding. Do you remember when I was talking about prior to the last election and Mr. Poilievre enjoying success in the polls, and it was daily, right? He wanted to go to let's go to have an election now. Let's do this now. And then he would blame the NDP for propping up the Liberal. You understand what I'm talking about, right? I think that I don't think I'm hearing that from anybody at this point. The Liberals are enjoying success and are seeing their caucus grow. The Conservatives, I think, are probably trying to rally the troops. And the NDP don't have a leader yet, and that's not happening till March. So, and I'll tell you that these campaigns are rather costly. And I don't think anybody, at least in the political realm, wants to have an election now. And then it comes to the voter. And I don't think Canadians want to go back to the polls yet. I'm sure that there are adamant Liberal supporters and devout Conservative supporters that say, yep, let's go right now. But the majority of you are like, guys, we just did this. Go play nice. It's going to be interesting times, I think, in the not-too-distant future here. But that's just my thoughts on Mr. Jeneroux's crossing of the floor. We'll get somebody who's got more education when it comes to political science to weigh in on this when we come back from the break. A conversation with Professor of Political Science at Cape Breton University, Dr. Tom Urbaniak, will be joining us. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. We're back in minutes. Welcome back to the Todd Veinotte Show. When it comes to politics, particularly at the federal level, there is always something happening in Ottawa, isn't there? And just when we think things are starting to calm down and we're starting to get back into a quote-unquote routine at Parliament Hill, then the next foot drops. And that foot yesterday was the defection of Matt Jeneroux, who left the Conservative caucus to join the Liberals. And I'm very pleased to welcome back to the show Professor of Political Science at Cape Breton University. That's Dr. Tom Urbaniak. Tom, how are you?
Very good, Dan. How are you?
I am well. I didn't even know where to start with this. I went off on a long diatribe there before the break about how this just feels like this fuels the debate about politicians just being in it for themselves. Is that the feel you get from floor crossings?
Floor crossings have been part of parliamentary history, not only in this country, but in other countries that use the British model. They're to be expected. Some great statespeople have been floor crossers. Of course, the famous example of Winston Churchill is often cited. So floor crossings do happen on principle sometimes. We shouldn't assume that every single one of them is merely opportunistic. There are issues sometimes at stake. There are concerns about the tenor of leadership or the direction of a particular party. So I would interpret any floor crossing or look at any floor crossing with some care and some nuance.
This one obviously isn't the first, at least from the Conservative caucus to the Liberals in Ottawa. This is the third. And does this indicate that there is a fracture or at least some discontent within the Conservative caucus?
It does. So Pierre Poilievre seemed to have emerged from his convention, from his leadership review successfully. He got 87.4% of the delegate support. There were no immediate floor crossings after that. That was a good sign for him. He changed his tone a little bit. He started to come across as somewhat more collegial, partly because the Conservatives don't want to go into an election in the very near future. They need some time. But this, of course, does deflate, to some extent, Pierre Poilievre's leadership. We will see what happens next. There have been other incidents that have weakened his hold over the caucus, or have at least shown us that his hold might not be that strong over the caucus. The Jamil Jivani episode from this week, sort of the rogue MP negotiating on his own with his friend J.D. Vance and then lecturing Canadians on behalf of the American administration. Of course, Poilievre repudiated those remarks, but it didn't look great. An incident last week with Mike Dawson, the New Brunswick Conservative MP, this sort of made it into the public arena as a result of a caucus meeting. You'll recall that this is the MP who said he doesn't want to accept a pay raise that takes effect in April.
Right.
And apparently in a caucus meeting, he was heckled by his colleagues, his Conservative colleagues. It's reported that he walked out of the caucus meeting. There were some hurt feelings. It just feels like the leader does not have a firm control over the party right now. And this matters. This matters technically and legally because the Conservatives have decided that they will be bound by the Reform Act, which means that the caucus can, at some point in the future, force a leadership vote. So 20% of the caucus members would have to sign a petition saying that they want a leadership vote of the caucus, and then a simple majority of the caucus members could remove the leader and cause an interim leader to be appointed.
The Jivani issue is an interesting one, isn't it, Tom? All of the things that you said. Mr. Poilievre says that the Conservative Party stands for a united Canada, and there was some discussion over separatism with regards to that. He's in a real tight situation with this. I think in other times that there would have been an expulsion there, but if he kicks somebody out, then he puts the government into almost into that majority territory.
Yeah, so I don't see Jamil Jivani ever joining the Liberal caucus. So
right.
If he ever leaves the Conservative caucus, it would be in all likelihood to sit as an independent. Most Conservatives are not MAGA, but there is an element of MAGA within the Conservative Party, and this is something that Pierre Poilievre himself has tried to straddle. This is why in the convention speech at the end of January, he didn't mention Donald Trump at all, even while trying to shore up his Canadian patriotic credentials. In terms of a potential Liberal majority happening without an intervening election, this will be something to watch over the next few weeks. There are a few things in play. The Liberals are 3 short of a majority now because they've had 2 resignations, right. Chrystia Freeland and Bill Blair. The Liberals will probably win those by-elections. They're in Toronto. Then you'll recall that there was a seat in Quebec, Terrebonne, which was declared vacant last week by the Supreme Court of Canada. So the Liberal candidate had won that seat by one vote. And the Supreme Court has essentially ordered a by-election in that seat. The one vote was over the Bloc Québécois. So will the Bloc Québécois be able to take that seat and deny the Liberals a majority? This is a seat that has often gone Bloc in the past, so the Liberals really do have a chance. Another MP to watch is the NDP deputy leader, Alexandre Boulay. I don't expect him to be joining the Liberals, but he's being courted by Québec Solidaire, the provincial party, and there's an upcoming provincial election in Quebec to potentially be the co-leader or co-spokesperson, as they call it, of that party. So that would mean giving up his federal seat, and the Liberals have consistently placed second in that riding. Boulay was probably winning that riding on the strength of his own popularity. So the Liberals would have a real shot there. And then there are just other Conservatives or other NDP members who might be in conversations with the Liberals. We know that Laurie Idlut, the NDP MP for Nunavut, has been having some conversations with the Liberals. She has said that she's staying with the NDP, but her statement was not absolutely emphatic. I wouldn't be surprised if those conversations are continuing.
Mark Carney is enjoying some success, both as the party is in the polls, but particularly as the leader of the party. Some are referring to him, Tom, as being almost old school progressive conservative. Do you take that view? Do you think he's obviously much closer to the center than Justin Trudeau was, but is he a progressive conservative?
He is governing in a way that would not seem foreign to a progressive conservative in the 1980s, early 1990s. Of course, the issues are different. The relationship with the United States is very different.
Right.
Back then, the progressive conservative agenda was to move Canada closer into a closer economic relationship with the United States. But Mark Carney would have been at home probably in the old progressive conservative party. I do agree with that analysis.
Mark Carney is obviously watching all of this very closely and getting towards that, I would assume, goal of a majority government. How much talk's going on behind the scenes here, Tom, to try and convince perhaps despondent conservatives to make the jump?
There are undoubtedly some conversations happening with the conservatives who are reputed to be more moderate, possibly with some of the Quebec conservatives as well. So I wouldn't be surprised if something else happens. And then if the Liberals do gain a parliamentary majority, what does that mean for Pierre Poilievre's leadership? One of the things that's keeping Poilievre securely in the leadership for now is the possibility that there could be a federal election any time. So the Conservatives don't have the luxury of time. But if the Liberals were to get into majority territory and then have a margin of, a few MPs, so not just a majority of one, because that's very fragile. That starts to rely on the Speaker to break through. But if the Liberals are somehow able to create a little bit of a margin for themselves, and that really does put Poilievre's leadership at risk because the caucus has the power to remove him. Another major change, if the Liberals do squeak into majority territory, will be something we don't see as much, and that's the dynamic on the committees. Because now to get something through committee, the Liberals need either the Conservatives or the Bloc Québécois. The NDP doesn't count in committees because they don't have guaranteed seats on any of the standing committees because they don't have official party status. So that has really slowed down the legislative output in the House of Commons. There actually aren't that many bills getting passed. But suddenly, even with the slenderest of margins for a majority, the Liberals would have a majority on each of the standing committees of the House of Commons. So then we could probably expect to see faster legislative output, but then also in a way more accountability on the part of the Liberals for that output, because they can't blame the opposition for holding things up.
Tom, we're almost out of time. There was some speculation heating up right after the Christmas break that that we were perhaps going to see a snap election call or a spring election. Do you think that's in the cards?
I think the government is operating on the two lanes here. Even though Mark Carney has said no, he's not going to call an election. There are people in his office who are undoubtedly mapping out that scenario. They are impressed by his polling numbers. They are worried that those polling numbers can't possibly hold up forever. Just because of the economic situation, because of variables like what the United States will do, tariffs, or inevitable scandals that plague any government that's been in office for a while. So there will be people within the Liberal Party who want to go with that advantage. Mark Carney himself, I think, given my study of his personality, it would be on the more reluctant side and would prefer to just steadily try to build a majority from within the current House of Commons and go with that scenario. And even then, just to get by and not take that risk, because that's a huge risk. 36-day campaign, anything can happen.
Tom, I appreciate your time, sir.
Thank you so much, Dan. Have a good day.
That is Tom Urbaniak. He is a professor of political science at Cape Breton University. Time for a break. We're going to get an update on the news, and on the other side of it, it's time for the open hour. Lines are open, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Regular rules apply. You can bring anything to the conversation, and I look forward to hearing from you after the update. Welcome back. Floor crossings, Epstein file arrests, government spending more than they can afford or should, Olympic hockey, and more. There is certainly a lot of things to talk about. This is the Friday Eve edition of the Open Hour. Very glad you're able to spend some time with us. The telephone lines, folks, are wide open. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. That is the number if you want to join the show. I'm very curious as to what your thoughts were on the hockey game, if you watched it at all yesterday. Maybe you didn't watch it and really could care less about hockey. But I can tell you that you can't, at least in my experience over the last 24 hours, you were unable to go anywhere where people weren't talking about that game. Some calling it one of the best, if not the best, hockey games that they've watched. I think that probably would have changed, should have the result been different, but it wasn't. And of course, controversy whenever there's a playoff game or whenever there's a quarterfinal game in that sport, always controversy. The Czechia coach not happy with the officiating, many fans not happy with the officiating, and even Team Canada's coach not happy with the officiating. If depending on what view you look at, some suggest that the Czechs had 6 players on the ice when they scored. Some suggesting that officials are afraid to call penalties against Team Canada. Regardless, semifinal game against Finland, gold medal game today against the United States for the women. And I was just coming in from the newsroom, and it looks like Rachel Homan just scored a big end on Korea and is well on the way to winning that game. And hopefully, I don't want to jinx it, but hopefully gets through the 10th and advances to the medal round in women's curling. So lots to talk about there. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. But regular rules apply, folks. You can chat about whatever it is on your mind. Let's welcome James to the show. James, how are you?
Fine, thank you. Good morning.
What's on your mind?
Last Friday, the Minister of Justice, Attorney General, appointed a judge, and this I'll explain in a moment, all the details for those who aren't familiar, and it got a fair bit of media play. So my punchline would be this is a controversial issue in the public domain, but it's a little bit complicated, obviously, whenever you're talking about judges and the law and independence of the judiciary and so on. I'd like to suggest you might want to get a political science commentator, or a retired law professor would be perhaps even better. Someone who could comment on this from a informed but, shall we say, neutral perspective. So very briefly, the provincial government appointed a lawyer from, I believe, Pictou, named Cameron McKean to become a provincial court judge. He happens to twice have been the co-chair of the provincial election campaign of the Progressive Conservative Party of Nova Scotia. Very briefly, I'll read what Iain Rankin, the, I guess, interim leader of the Liberal Party, regardless, Liberal MLA Iain Rankin had to say, quote, "While we respect the qualifications of individuals, placing someone so closely tied to partisan politics in such a critical role undermines public confidence in the courts," unquote. My personal opinion, you might guess, why I'm calling, is that, yeah, this doesn't quite look great. And this is putting the qualifications of the individual aside. I believe it would be the case that having played such a significant and high-profile role on the partisan side of things, there have to be other candidates equally or more qualified out there. It just doesn't seem to pass the smell test with me. But I hope you could maybe get Wayne McKay or somebody who could comment on this from a much more informed perspective.
We'll do our very best to do that, James. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255 did not pass the smell test for me either. This feels like, even if, and to James' point, even if Mr. McKean, or Judge McKean, I guess now, is has the most qualifications, is the best person for the job, this certainly does not pass that smell test. It certainly does look like it is the old saying. Do you remember the old saying, jobs for the boys, right? That being said, I think there are some in the legal community that would suggest that Judge McKean would recuse himself to avoid any kind of conflict of interest in this. But yes, I agree with you, James. It does not look good. It does not look like this was this. I mean, it is what it is. It looks like that somebody that was a good soldier got an appointment, and that never looks good when it comes to politics. Appreciate the call. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, Dave.
Yes, hello, Dan. I think you framed your view nicely on members crossing the floor. I'm with you because they get the votes of whomever in their district or area, and that's why they got in. And to me, in my personal opinion, this is politics at its best. And I think the Liberals have played the political game beautifully with the NDP earlier. Coinciding with them to stay in, and they really have played the game much better politically. And if this trend keeps going the way it is, and it looks like it, we will have a majority Liberal government. And folks, I hope we're all happy with this because it's going to be another length of time under the Liberal reign. And remember, Mark Carney got in with his elbows up. And in fact, Trump, I would get a big assist on that. And you're right. The Conservatives had a double-digit lead before all this unveiled itself when Mark Carney was elected. We didn't even know this guy, right? We just sort of a knee-jerk, in my opinion, a knee-jerk reaction to helping us and saving us from Trump, right? Feasting on Canada. And I think this game, we had a politician here in this province, and I can't remember the name, and I won't use the name, that was retiring because he had family issues and he wanted to take some time off. And lo and behold, the Liberals got back in, and he ran in his area of Nova Scotia, riding, and got back in, and voila, he has been posted a pretty darn nice job.
Attorney General of the country, and I'll say the name, it was Sean Fraser.
Thank you. I didn't want to use that, but I guess there's nothing wrong with that. But exactly,
it's the 100%
political. It's a political game, and this is what it is. And I just hope we're going to be guided in the right direction over the next few years. We are in a bit of a frump. You look at the affordability, not just in our province. When I hear 40,000 children here that are living in poverty, and the next meal might not be there. Well, hopefully it's not that bad, but it sounds grim. And I don't think this is just in our province. I think it's going across the country. And we need some. Would the Conservatives do better? Who knows? But the fact is, we had a knee-jerk reaction. We wanted to get the Liberals in. A group of us, it was a close election. But, if they get the majority, we're going to have to live with it. And hopefully, Mark Carney, and I do wish our country well, Dan. I really do. And I hope he makes some right decisions. And but I don't agree with crossing over the floor like this. I really don't. But I guess that's politics. It can happen on both sides. And that's where we're at. And anyways, that's my opinion on this. It makes me very upset. And it does make me question our governance and the way it's run, but that's just the way it is, I suppose, my friend.
All right, Dave, appreciate it, sir.
Cheers. Thank you.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. The Thursday or Friday Eve open hour continues after this break. All right, welcome back. Open hour continues. Lines are open, folks. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Your chance to chat about whatever it is that is on your mind today. Lots of things to discuss. We're obviously talking about floor crossings today. Matt Jeneroux switching teams yesterday and now wearing the red tie in the House of Commons. The former Prince arrested in England for his involvement with Mr. Epstein, and it certainly is. That is really grabbing headlines around the world today. Government spending more than they can. The New Brunswick government, big-time deficit into the billion now, over $1 billion. We're expecting a budget here in the next couple weeks. That's expected to be in the billions. And Olympic hockey, just as I was off getting a recharge on the coffee cup, somebody was sitting in there talking about that hockey game yesterday. It is really the sport in this country that galvanizes us as Canadians. And, boy, we're going to look forward to that gold medal game today, Canada and the United States. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Let's go back to the phones and say hello to Carlos. Carlos, how are you?
Hey, Dan. How are you doing?
I'm well, sir. What's on your mind?
Good. So here we are again, talk about floor crossing. It's just sad. Actually, the last caller was really telling because he actually said, I don't like it. It makes me happy. But that's how it is. And that's, I think, highlights a problem here. Is like we just are complacent about it. We don't like it. It's horrible. It's not nice. But that's just how it is, things. Instead of trying to make a political issue so politicians could talk about it, we just leave it at that. At the moment, we all call in, yeah, that was not nice, that's not good. But at the end, oh, well, that's how it is. And that is a key problem there. But I do agree with you. It does affect people participating in politics, especially the youth. We already see very low turnout numbers for the young voters. And when they see something like this, it's like, okay, why should we even care about it? So I completely agree with you. And if I may add, and not just that, but also even politicians seems not to be willing to put up their face after the election. For example, I've been teaching politics for 20 years at SMU. And this year, I was able to encourage students to establish a political science society. Very nice. So I said, okay, so let's try to get some interview with politicians. I'm sorry, I'm busy. Maybe in the future. Very not nice. How can we get the young people to participate if politicians only show up during election? And it doesn't do good to us at all. So I agree with you about like cross-flooring, and it's something that needs to be dealt with 100%.
Carlos, appreciate the call, sir.
Thank you.
902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. It just, we talk about the look, right? Or the optics. Or as I think it was caller Dave that said it did, or maybe it was somebody else on the first caller that we had, James, that was talking about the smell test. Like these floor crossings, and it's not just exclusive to this session of government. I've never liked it. It's happened here in Nova Scotia. There have been some high-profile people that have switched teams, right? And it to me, never passes that smell test. It always feels like there's some kind of promise made. There's some kind of deal made. Some of the floor crossings that we've seen in the past, and I think Tom Urbaniak, our political scientist from Cape Breton University, said earlier in the show that there's been famous ones like Winston Churchill switched teams, right? And during his rise to power, it always feels like this is the dirty end of politics, right? This is where we focus on politics. This is why people, and I said it earlier, think that all politicians are corrupt. Because when something like this happens, it doesn't feel like it's for the greater good of the constituent. It doesn't feel like it's for the greater good of the country. It feels like it's for the greater good of the politician. You can bet that if Mark Carney was in the same situation with seats and Mr. Poilievre was still staring down a double-digit gap in the polls, that this wouldn't even be a topic of discussion, at least in my opinion. Mr. D'Entremont may disagree with me on this, but it feels like, and I've said it countless times here on the show, politicians tend to move with the way that the winds are blowing, right? And this is an example of that. And this, to Carlos's point, is why people are disengaged with it, right? Can you imagine if you were a constituent in Matt Jeneroux's riding, and you are a diehard conservative supporter, you're a card-carrying member of the party, and you threw your support, maybe your money, behind Matt Jeneroux and his election campaign, and then he turns around and does this? Like, how does that make you feel as a constituent or as a voter? Certainly, and none of these crossings have been anybody that I've had the ability to vote for. But it puts a bad taste in my mouth. Can you imagine what it would feel like for voters in the actual riding that these people represent? Some of these ridings have been close. Some of these ridings not. I'd be pretty darn upset if it was me, and I had thrown my support behind this guy and forked over my hard-earned cash to support his campaign, based on what he told me he was going to do, and based on the fact that he was a member of a conservative party that I believed in and that I wanted to see lead this country. As a voter, I would be upset. That's why I think if somebody wants to cross the floor, you have the absolute right to do so, but you should have to step down and face a by-election. That's the way I think it should work. Let's see if we can grab one more phone call here before the break. Kim, how are you?
Hi. I'm going to be quick. On this floor crossing, it is a part of our democratic process.
Right.
Nobody had any issues when Liberals were crossing over. Conservatives greeted the Liberals with open arms.
Yep.
If a member, you got to think, Pierre's Conservatives have been in opposition for 10 years. It may get to the point that an MP actually wants to get something done for the riding. I mean, there's only so much they can do for the ridings in opposition. So it just may get down to that point that they just need to make a choice. And I also think there are some circumstances going on that they're putting country over party to try to unite one strong mandate to get things done. not blocked, not stopped, just to unite. We're in a different world, different circumstances. Politics are not the same. You get to a point you have to put what's right before your party. And as long as Pierre's there, they're going to be opposition for another 10 years. I think it's a part of the democratic process. And like I said, if that's their choice. He did resign. Pierre wouldn't let him go when he wanted to. He kind of threatened him to stay. So technically, if you want to be technical, he was an ex-conservative because he did resign. So he resigned. He chose to go to another party.
Thanks,
I
Kim.
think sometimes it's got to be country before party in this political landscape right now.
Appreciate your thoughts, Kim.
Thanks.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're back after the update. All right, welcome back. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Let us go right to the phone lines and welcome Kevin to the show. Kevin, how are you?
Good morning, Dan. How are you doing?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
We're just talking about the smell test and the floor crossings and whatnot. And I agree with you. I think they should definitely go to a by-election because you're sort of it's a form of betrayal to your voters, really. I mean, if it's allowed in the system, I wouldn't call it democratic by any means. But as far as James and his smell test, and I think Canadians, well, and Americans and around the world, we've come nose blind to the pig barn that's right next door, or up in Ottawa or wherever.
Right.
And I think Canadians gotta really stop and call out what's wrong. I don't care what party it is. You get all this going on in the States about the fraud over in Minneapolis and these people going to the streets. Where are the people going to the streets and just looking what's going on in these Epstein files? If we've come to the point where we can't protect our own children, what kind of society do we have? I'm just an old guy, but I got a grandson now, so
right.
I'm kind of looking for that. But where are these, no one's above the law sort of deal? It seems like they can pick and choose when they want to use that.
Thanks.
So,
thanks, Kev.
I don't know. Like, what do you got? What's your point on that, Dan?
Well, I think you're right. I think that Canadians and voters in general have become complacent. I think that you just look at the voter turnout, right? Look at how many people actually get off their backsides and go and participate in the elections. Those numbers are dropping just about every election campaign, particularly at the provincial and at the municipal level as well, Kevin. So I'll agree with you. Canadians need to call out what's wrong, and regardless of their stripe, I agree 100%. And I think that I think I said this during the beginning of the show today, and I appreciate the call, Kev. That I think the Epstein, you mentioned the Epstein files. I think that this has gotten to a point where we have seen some people in some pretty powerful positions that have participated in activities, I'll call them, with this guy. And what they are, we don't know. And there are people that are mentioned in the Epstein files that are adamant that they never even met Mr. Epstein. So I think that we need to have some kind of international tribunal investigation, whatever you want to call it, so that we can get to the bottom of this. There's still thousands and thousands and thousands of names and pages that have been redacted and photographs that haven't been released, and there are some very high profile that have been people that have been named in these files, former presidents, current presidents, and in the sense of the UK, former cabinet ministers, members of the House of Lords, a prince or a former prince. So you're right. it's time that we do call things out like that, and that's what we do here on this program. 902-405-6001, 877-801-8255. Where are we here? Let's go to Stephen. Hello, Stephen.
Hey, how's it going, Dan?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
This kind of relates to actually what the gentleman was just talking about, to the politicians crossing the floor, to my subject, and to the employees who are told you have to drive however many distances back to an office.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, basically what it is you need to people have to be offered options, all right, not just as employees and stuff like that, because if you don't offer options or don't allow people the chance to choose, to feel like they have control of their lives, and even in small ways.
Mm-hmm.
If you basically turn around and say, you either do this because I say so, or this is going to happen, people are going to start feeling like they're property and not being allowed to choose by their own conscience. People are starting to feel like they have no control over their lives, like they're just the property of something else, like a company or a government. Even the people in the parties there are choosing to choose to their conscience, or even, as the gentleman previously spoke, their constituents, because not every single constituent is thinking the way that gentleman might be thinking, because you got how many thousands of people,
right?
And not everybody's thinking the same way. Everybody's starting to feel like they have no control, and when you have governments and you have employers and places all over the world that basically turn around and says, sorry, you're not human enough to make a decision. I'm not going to give you any options. Then what's going to happen? You basically are someone's property, and you're going to feel stressed out. And that's what's the voters' issues, even, because people are feeling like they don't have any options, and yet there are options. I even put forward one time, if you have all the people who didn't vote get together on Facebook or the internet or wherever you want to play it, and decided to vote and turn around, well, let's elect the Lobster Party. Let's elect the marijuana. Let's put them in power. Let's see what happens. But at least we're going to stop going with the same people who have proven time and time again that we're going to keep doing things wrong. Give somebody else a chance. Maybe these people who don't know anything about politics might do something right.
Thanks, Stephen. Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Let's say hello to Ken. Ken, how are you?
Good, Dan. How are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
Well, I want to talk about this crossing the floor.
Sure.
That I heard different comments, some of your own, but I don't think it's quite as simple and black and white as some believe. I think that voters, and I was involved in a political past, not provincial politics and stuff, but I had to be elected and stuff. But
all right, I get it.
Anyhow, so like voters many times will vote for the person, or which could be a man or a woman, and their platform and their ability to lead and to perform. So if that person that you voted for found themselves in a position or a political party that really wasn't going the correct way, and you looked at it and said, "Oh wow, this is not turning out all that well," well then, those people, they're elected. I would elect that person to lead, which to me means to guide their voters the correct way, and that could be change. So I commend some of these people that are crossing and doing quite possibly the right thing, and not holding on to the wrong thing and staying back and say, let's go to the U.S. for a second here, okay? And we'll talk about Donald Trump. And I think there's many people down there today, if they had the chance, they would take their vote back. So if you elected someone who was a supporter of Trump and now said, oh, wow, hell with this, I'm just going to go along with it, and because I'm afraid of him or whatever, I'm just going to swallow it all, and you have to swallow it with me, I wouldn't like that. I want somebody that's going to stand up and do the right thing. So I'd like your opinion on that.
For sure, Ken, and I appreciate the call. The American system's a little bit different than ours, right? Because Americans will vote for members of their House of Representatives and Senate and then they get a vote for the president. So that it's not that they're voting in their constituency for the president. I will agree with you to an extent, Ken, that some people may vote for the actual person that's in the jurisdiction, in the riding, in their area, and maybe because of the person who they are and what they've done for the community. Others will vote for that person based on what they're promising to do as a member of parliament in this case, or as an MLA, or even as a city councillor. And there's a portion of the population that will do that. But when it comes to federal politics, there's a reason why when people run, they run as a member of a party, and their signs are the specific color, because for the most part, my experience is that the majority of people that vote in a federal election are voting for the color of the sign, not for the person on it. And for the color of the sign, and that would be, of course, an extension of a vote for the leader. There are some instances in recent memory where we've had federal elections, and they will put the leader's name right on their signs. So I think you get probably a mix of all, Ken, but I think the majority are looking at the bigger picture of whom this person will be working under, right? When it comes to our system. There are some that suggest that we follow the American system, Ken. There are some that suggest that we vote for an MP and then we vote for a prime minister, right? Like more along the lines of the American system. But there's pros and cons to everything when it comes to that. I think that might eliminate this problem, but I think that there's, again, what happens if you hang the house, kind of like we used to see in the U.S., not like this year, but like we've seen in the past, where you have a Republican president and a Democratic Congress. Anyway, appreciate the call, Ken. I appreciate your opinions. We're going to take another break. Open Hour continues on the other side. You are listening to the Todd Veinotte Show. Open Hour after the break. Welcome back. I've been missing the emails here, so I'm going to try to get a couple in before we go back to the phones. Rob writes, in our Westminster parliamentary system, floor crossing is permitted because voters don't elect a party, they elect a person who represents them. Candidates join parties, indicate their general policy preferences. If we prevent joining another party, when your current party changes policies or leadership, for example, we would be holding members hostage to their party and would therefore be electing a party, not an individual. To prevent floor crossing, we would therefore be changing our system of elected representation. That comes to us from Rob. Ken writes, hey, correction to one of your callers. Matt Jeneroux had not resigned. He stated he would do it in the spring. Also, had not sat in the House of Commons since the 5th of November-ish. He was spending more time with his family, which is the standard politician line. And yes, floor crossing is part of our system, but floor crossing to change the will of the people, which was to have a minority government, seems a little bit different than just one or two walking over to get things done for their riding. Just my opinion. That comes to Ken. And this one from Phil. It says, hey, Dan, I'm okay with floor crossing. It's up to the voters to keep or throw them out at the next election. Stephen Harper had a chance to change the law in 2006 when David Emerson crossed the floor to be with the CPC. It should also be noted that Pierre was part of that government. And that's from Phil from Berwick. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Let's go back to the phones and say hello to Paul. Paul, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
I just can't believe, Canadian gone retarded or something. We're still supporting a government that's forked out billions, or I don't know how many millions, to another country, and our own country's dying. It's ridiculous.
So you think it's time to go to the polls then, Paul?
Wow. It's going to be rigged again, I'm sure, but...
hang on. Did you say rigged?
Well, yes.
How is it rigged?
It will be rigged.
How is the election rigged?
Well, if you're friends with China does everything.
Right.
They'll do it again. It's ridiculous.
So the Canadian last Canadian election was rigged, Paul? Is that what you're saying, Paul? Is that the last election was rigged?
That's what I believe, strongly believe. I strongly believe that. Because there was a lot more supporters for even Conservative or anybody else but them that they showed at the polls on the news and on TV and everywhere. But then again, there was a majority win or whatever. So
okay,
it's just ridiculous. I just find it ridiculous that people are still supporting this government that's ruining us to the ground. We have no money, the healthcare is zero, and we're sending still money overseas to people we don't even, not even going to do anything to our country. If we are in trouble, they're not going to help us. Nobody else is going to help us. We've got to help ourselves.
Okay, Paul,
Thanks.
appreciate it.
Appreciate it.
Have a good one.
Thank you.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Do you think for 1 second that the last federal election was rigged to the point where it changed the outcome of the election? If that was the case, if there was any evidence of that, do you think that the opposition parties would be absolutely losing their minds right now? And if we had an election today, and you mentioned polls, Paul, if we had an election today, according to those polls, it would be another Liberal victory. In fact, this time a majority. So I don't know if you're going to get what you want if we go to the election. Anyway, appreciate the call. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, Shelley.
Oh, hi. How are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
Oh, it's nice and sunny out there today. That's a plus.
It is.
I just want, like, yesterday, I don't know, yesterday or a couple of days ago, you had a gentleman on regarding public housing, funding for public housing. I think his name was Braden, or something Braden.
He was on from the Advocate for Public Housing.
For
Yeah.
students.
Yeah.
He was talking about getting vacancies for the students coming into.
Oh, you're talking about the residency spaces at the universities.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
See, I agree with public housing. There's a lot of need out there, but I certainly don't agree with public housing being involved with providing vacancies for students. The problem is we have hundreds of students on campus, and we also have many I'm told, and I work at the university. Mm-hmm. I know there's vacancies at the campus, but the students don't want to live on residence. They want to live in these fancy apartments, and especially if public housing is involved and giving them a special rate to get these apartments. No, public housing should not be involved with providing housing for students. It's the lost cause, and the university can well afford it. With what the students pay for tuition and how much it costs and how much they're paying their professors, they do not need public funding to help their students for accommodation. No, don't agree with it.
Shelley, I agree with you 100%.
Definitely should not be involved. The thing is, I think the big thing that's upsetting everybody is it's where the money is going, the decisions that are made, and where the funding is going. Like, for example, we have a John Fraser and Lena Dehab, the immigrant minister. They were both involved in giving out $500,000 to a restaurant here in the city, Meza Restaurant or something. They have 4 restaurants, and they wanted to open a 5th one. So they were given $500,000 to help open up a 5th restaurant. I don't agree with that. If this company already has 4 restaurants on the go, they don't need public funding to open a 5th one. There's so many small businesses in the city going out because they need help. No, the public funding and the money that the government is sending out is unfair. It's not going to the right people. That's the problem.
All right, Shelley, appreciate it.
Thank you.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. To her point on student housing, I think that the universities have a stronger role to play in the housing situation here in Nova Scotia. To Shelley's point, that, I mean, they have some universities in Nova Scotia, not all, but some, have significant amounts of empty rooms right now. And we talked to the president of the student union, or of Students Nova Scotia, my mistake, who said that it's just too bloody expensive to stay there. So if it's cheaper for a student to live off campus than on campus, there's a problem there. And 2, I think universities need to do a better job in providing housing for students. They're going to bring students in. If they're going to charge those massive tuition fees that Shelley was talking about, then they should have a responsibility to at least house a bigger chunk of their student body. Because every student that goes out into off campus to live takes an apartment that somebody else could be renting. Or a group of them get together and take an apartment that somebody or a family could be renting. I think the universities have a stronger role to play in the housing crisis. Last word today goes to John. John, how are you?
Hi, very good. How are you?
I'm well. What's on your mind?
Just wanted to make a quick point on the floor crossing that I don't know has been made yet. I think what's happening right now in the United States is a real good example of what happens when there's not enough checks and balances in place. So when our forefathers drew up our Constitution and how the Canadian government was going to operate, they chose to have a system in which the members of Parliament were elected. Well, if a member of Parliament is elected and decides that he doesn't think that the leadership that's being provided by his party is going in the right direction, his choosing to cross the floor is another check and balance that our government has, and I'm glad they have it.
Okay. Appreciate it, John.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
To that point, let me ask you this question, everybody, and I appreciate all of the calls today. We're almost out of time, but let me leave you with this thought before we get the update on the news here at the top of the hour. The federal election was less than a year ago, or about a year ago. If to John's point, if you're not happy with the leadership, then what has changed in that last year as a politician? Pierre Poilievre hasn't changed a lot of his stances on things. He softened his stance on a couple of things, and the Carney government has instituted some of the things that Pierre Poilievre ran on. So what has changed other than the poll numbers? Other than when they all signed up for their nominations, the Conservative Party of Canada was enjoying a 20% gap in polling. They had a 20 to 25 point lead. Suddenly that's not there anymore. And if you follow the polls now, it doesn't look like they're going to get back to that. In fact, it doesn't look like if there was an election today, they would win. So is that all that changed? The leader hasn't changed. Most of the party platform hasn't changed. So what's changed? Why is it suddenly that you can't stomach in good conscience be a member of the caucus? Somebody, and I can't remember who it was, and I apologize, said that we need leaders. I absolutely 100% agree with you that we need leaders. Now, wouldn't it be leadership to go to your jurisdiction, stand up on a soapbox, and say, look, folks, when I asked for your vote a year ago, I believe that this was going to happen, that something this in this platform, in this party, in the way that this was going. That is no longer the case. So I cannot, in good conscience, be a part of that caucus. And very much like the British system, which our system is based on, resign. There are resignations in the British House of Commons all the time. Never in Canada. Friday Free For All goes tomorrow. Look forward to your calls. When we come back, the show continues. The Halifax Mooseheads, who are getting ready to head out on a big road trip and try to reverse their fortunes a bit. A conversation with the media relations guru and good friend of the show, Scott MacIntosh, when we come back. See you after the news. Welcome back to hour number 3 of this, the Thursday, or as we like to call it, the Friday Eve edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Alstrand. Very glad you're able to spend some time with us as we get you set up for the weekend, and it will be a busy weekend for the Halifax Mooseheads as they make one of those Quebec road swings and play lots of games in a short period of time, it feels like, and I'm very pleased to welcome into the program today to give us a little bit of a setup for the weekend and his perspective on things, the Halifax Mooseheads manager of media relations, and I will say it, a former 95.7 News Radio alumni, and that is Scott MacIntosh. Scotty, how are you, brother?
I'm doing great, Dan. How are you?
Did you watch that hockey game yesterday?
We were fist bumping in the office, I can tell you that.
It was something else, wasn't it?
Didn't think they were going to win. Honestly, it was looking pretty pretty bleak there for a little bit in the third period, but never doubt the Canadians. I guess they found a way, even with the Czechs having 6 players on the ice, right?
Yeah, for sure. Well, yeah, nobody knew until like after the game. It's like, wait a minute, right?
Yeah, that was crazy. Hard to catch that when you're watching on TV, a little easier in person, but I'm surprised with, Canada's got about 17 coaches on the bench that not one of them was able to pick up on that, especially when you see the 6 guys celebrating. But it was, a considerable amount of time that they had 6 on the ice down at the other end. Typically, the too many men, as you know, just kind of happens when the puck comes along the boards doing a line change, and that's when they get caught. So pretty surprising that nobody caught it, and but fortunate for Canada to pull out that win. Great for Nick Suzuki. A lot of you might be one of them being a Leafs guy. A lot of anti-Nick Suzuki guys saying that maybe it should have been Connor Bedard there, but he gets that tying goal, and then
Mitch Marner, right?
Another tough one for you Leafs fans. Mitch Marner scores a goal. But hey, we're all on the same team right now, I guess.
Yeah, Mitch Marner, who has for since he came into the NHL been criticized for not being a big game player and disappearing. Didn't disappear in that play, did he? That was something right from the blue line, like their blue line.
That was incredible to watch, and you could see. Dostal was terrific throughout that game for the Czechs in goal. Just a big guy, not really giving them anything to shoot at, but he kind of looked like he kind of followed along with Marner to the right and just gave him that window of opportunity to lift it in. And man, it was a beauty and a stress relief, that's for sure.
Yeah. Now we play Finland in the semifinals and watch the other side.
Easy.
Oh, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a conflict game. As many know, my much of my family are in Finland, so my phone's been blowing up today, I'll say. So we'll watch that one. Of course, I'll be pulling for Canada, but I'm sure my phone.
You're winning either way.
My phone will let me know what the score is before it happens. Anyway, Scotty, very quickly, from a franchise perspective, watching the Olympic Games has to be a real wind in your sails for the Halifax Mooseheads to see so many former Mooseheads that are at that. I think there was 5 of them at the Olympic tournament, right?
Yeah, the most out of any Quebec League team. So it is a very proud moment for the club. You've got, of course, Nathan McKinnon. Brad Marchand spent a little bit of time here, but more widely known as a Wildcat or Val-d'Or-Ferrer. But he did. He's from here, so we claim him a little bit. And then you've got Nikolai Ehlers, and then the Swiss have Timo Meier and Nico Hischier. So it was really cool to watch all of those guys all doing great things on the ice for their countries. You look at a team like Denmark with Ehlers. They've really improved their hockey over the years, and the Swiss are now once were a team that you'd roll over, but now they're a really formidable force in the international play with players like Hischier and Meier. So, pretty cool to see all of those guys, and really proud here with the organization.
It's got to be a little bit of help for your coaches behind the bench who you can watch these games and the kids in the locker room are watching these things too, and I mean you can be a Moosehead and you can get to bigger and better things, right?
Exactly. It's like, look here, these guys were once, sitting in the same locker room stall that you are, and now look where they're at. So I do know the plane, the boys flew up yesterday to Ottawa to play in Gatineau tonight. They arrived in time to watch the third period in the dressing room while eating St. Hubert chicken, I guess, and we're able to celebrate together in that overtime. So a pretty cool moment for the team to be able to share that together in one room.
I can tell you that we weren't eating St. Hubert chicken here, but our newsroom was full of people yesterday, and poor Blake was trying to read the news during the third period, and this Canada scored, and I think it went over the air. But anyway, it's all good. Scotty, to the matter at hand here, you mentioned that the team flew up to Quebec, another Quebec swing here.
Yeah, it is the final one of the season, actually, and it kicks off tonight against Gatineau, then goes to Drummondville tomorrow, and finish up in Rimouski. And, Mooseheads it's been, a trying year. It's a rebuild type of year, and, down towards the middle of the pack, lower part of the standings. So it's been an up and down. There's been some win streaks, some losing streaks, and some learning curves along the way, but this road trip in particular, aside from Drummondville, who's up there in the Western Conference, and the Mooseheads have already beat them this year, it's a pretty winnable road trip. You've got Gatineau out of the playoffs. Rimouski is just a point away from being out of the playoffs. So you look for this weekend. It would be a failure if they don't come away with 2 out of 3 wins here. And especially you want to win that one in Rimouski on Sunday because the Mooseheads own their first-round pick. And any chance you can get to give that team a loss and drive them down further in the standings and increase that lottery pick, the better. So that is one that's circled on the calendar for sure.
Mooseheads took the rules changed on the Mooseheads, so they took a little bit of a different tack this year and brought in an extra European and the European players on the roster this year have been performing very well.
They have. I mean, you bring Carlos Handel back, who was a draft pick of the Montreal Canadiens this past year, just a smooth skating defenseman, can make things happen offensively. And then Oleg Kulibiakin, a Russian, first time we've had a Russian in a number of years here. He has got elite offensive skill, a heck of a shot, and he's been fun to watch. And then Yasu Mensinen, a Finn, only the second Finn I think that's ever been on the Mooseheads roster, and he's a year older. You bring him in, he's 18 now, he'll be back again next year as a 19, and just typical Finnish hockey player, two-way forward, works hard, digs, and is just difficult to play against. So great to have him on the roster as well, and he's been able to contribute offensively here and there, and just been a great pickup as well. So pretty cool to see 3 Europeans on the roster, and we'll see what happens if all 3 are able to come back next year, or if there's an additional add in the import draft come July.
We'll have to wait and see. Scotty, game time tonight, 8 o'clock. You can catch the action live right here on 95.7 News Radio. Thanks, my friend, for joining us, and I'll let you go so you can get ready for the women's gold medal game today.
You can't wait, and great to chat with you, Dan.
That's Scott MacIntosh. He is the manager of media relations, and he does the pregame with Gareth, and of course, you used to listen to him right here on this radio station. We're going to take a break here on the program. We're going to come back. We're going to focus on the province a little bit here. Time to get things set up for that February 23rd date, a conversation with the leader of the Nova Scotia New Democrats, Claudia Chender, when we come back. All right, welcome back. February 23rd, circled on many calendars. That's the start of the resumption, I guess, of the session of the legislature as our MLAs all come to Halifax and get down to business. And, of course, right at the top of the agenda this time around is a budget. And there's on never a light day when it comes to things to talk about when it comes to the provincial government this day. I'm very pleased to welcome to the show to give us her thoughts on this upcoming session, the leader of the NDP in Nova Scotia. That's Claudia Chender. Claudia, how are you?
I'm great, Dan. How are you?
I am well. It seems like we haven't talked for a while.
It has been a while.
Back to work, I guess, next week, right? Are you looking forward to the session?
Right. Well, I'm looking forward to the opportunity to ask the questions that Nova Scotians have been giving us. As you know, and as your listeners are probably aware, we don't spend a lot of time in the legislature with this government, 30 days last year, which is, I think, a national record, actually. And so we are always grateful for the time that we have to get information and to help shape the policies and laws that, mean so much and have such a big impact on Nova Scotians' lives.
Claudia, the budget will be at the top of the agenda, and when the Premier was in the studio here a couple weeks ago, was pretty, well, he was non-committal, but he said that it was probably going to be over $1 billion in deficit, and this wouldn't be the first time, and it certainly has raised the eyebrows of Nova Scotians.
Absolutely. This is a government that was elected into an environment with a balanced budget. And they have spent more money than any government in history, and now they're going to table what looks to be the largest deficit of any government in history. And, the questions we're going to be asking really are, what do we have to show for it? There were a lot of promises from this government. They talk about being a government of action, but housing is still a huge affordability challenge for people across this province. It's getting more and more expensive, whether you rent or you own, or it's your taxes or your rent or your mortgage. We all know what's going on with power bills. Even if you're not being triple billed, it's getting more expensive. And, particularly outside of the city, I would say emergency rooms are closed as much as they're open. People are waiting at the Cobequid for 12 hours. So, we haven't seen those problems fixed, but we've seen a lot of money out the door, and we can't really be sure of where it went. And so this is one of the reasons why it's so important that we demand some more accountability from these guys.
Early in the show, Claudia, I said that I used the analogy that the government has a problem with the credit card and has a problem asking to use the credit card. There's a lot of outside the budget spending that goes on in this government.
Yeah, and it's really, what I want your listeners to know is how actually unusual and irresponsible that is. So in almost every other jurisdiction, if a government wants to spend extra money that they haven't budgeted, they need to come back to the legislature with a bill and debate it. And these guys have a majority. So, it's not that they wouldn't be able to spend it. It's just that they'd have to be accountable. They'd have to tell us what they were doing with it. The same way where if my kids spend their allowance and then they want something, they have to come explain to me why they want it. We have to have a conversation about it. They don't just get to spend the money on the sly. I mean, I do guard my wallet carefully at home, but when you have 3 teenagers, that's a requirement. But I think we're not asking for anything extraordinary here. I think Nova Scotians just want to know where all that money went. And the truth is, those are questions we have a really hard time getting answers to, and it shouldn't be that way.
Claudia, last session, the premier was short. I think it was 10 days. The premier spent a good chunk of those away from the legislature. He was just in New York. Just before he sat in here with me for an hour, he was down in Boston. Given that he's holding 2 portfolios, still, it feels like he's traveling an awful lot, isn't he?
Well, as far as we've been able to tell, the premier was out of the country, or out of the province, I should say, for 104 days last year. And he was in the legislature for 30. And, there's obviously good rationale for a premier to go on a trade mission or to have relationships with other governments. But this is, in the minds of a lot of the people that we hear from, really unbalanced. It would be one thing if things were humming along and our economy was growing and we weren't facing a lot of problems at home and we needed to expand. But really what's happening right now is that we've got a lot of challenges on the domestic front, and we have a premier who's appointed himself energy minister. And if you ask 10 people on the street, what's the biggest issue with energy in Nova Scotia? It's price. It's the cost of power. It's holding Nova Scotia Power accountable. But we haven't seen the premier do that other than in the occasional op-ed. He hasn't answered questions in the last 6 weeks about the credit downgrade that we're facing, because presumably he's been on the road. I think Nova Scotians have a lot of questions about that.
What's top of your list for you? Obviously, there's lots of things that are affecting Nova Scotians, but I would imagine you have a priority item that's got the big stars around it on your agenda list.
Well, I think it's just what we were talking about, Todd. I mean, I think we're just seeing a Nova Scotia that people don't really recognize and that they didn't sign up for. So, Nova Scotians for the last 5 or 6 years have just been working hard, living their life, just trying to provide for their families, trying to engage with their communities. And meanwhile, we've just seen things get more and more expensive, and we've seen healthcare just as hard to access. And so, I think the top of our agenda is trying to figure out, why the government has made the choices they have. Like, this is all the result of choices. And if this government was serious about making housing affordable, if they were serious about fixing healthcare, if they were serious about getting a handle on people's power bills, we'd see different choices. And so, this is a moment, particularly with a budget, where this government and this premier are going to have to answer to people.
I'd like to get your thoughts, Claudia, on the appointment to the bench of Cameron McKean, who we well know from his time in the premier's campaigns and in his transition team.
I think it's really problematic. I think, this is a government that has not been shy about talking about their friends. So, when the premier was first elected, one of the first things he did was to fire the heads of crown corporations and put new people in their place without any job competition of any kind. And when he was asked why, he said, because they're my friends. This is a long-standing political pattern of patronage that we have in Nova Scotia, and one that's been pretty thoroughly rejected, I would say, by Nova Scotians. And it's one that we think of as a historical relic. And I think that this government is really raising a lot of questions about the independence of something like the judiciary. These are questions that Nova Scotians shouldn't have to have. We look at what's going on in the world, we look at what's going on south of the border, and we like to think, I think a lot of us sort of breathe a sigh of relief, like, thank God that's not my experience. But when we find ourselves in a place where, the head of the premier's partisan election campaign becomes a provincial court judge as the result of a process that the government, has some considerable sway over. They appoint over half the members. I think that raises some really concerning questions.
And finally, Claudia, before we let you go, the premier has been out across the country and even into the United States, trumpeting his Wind West plan and all these kilowatt hours that are going to be generated. A report earlier this week from Stantec saying that, it's possible, but not near to the capacity that the premier had told us about. Your thoughts on that?
Well, again, this is a government that loves to put out press releases, that loves to talk about plans, but that has so far been quite thin on results. And I think the Wind West conversation is a really good example of that. I think most people would agree that it sounds great that we could have huge economic clean energy and economic activity on our offshore. But I think it's also really concerning that an expert would so deeply contradict the province's numbers. And further, I think what people aren't hearing when the government talks about Wind West is how far in the future that project is, if it even comes to pass. So we don't have any of the enabling infrastructure for Wind West. It's unclear how those procurements would go and if the customers that they're envisioning would even buy that power. It's a nice idea. That's where it is at the moment. But again, this is why we need this government to do their job, to go into the legislature and to answer questions. Because the reality is they can say whatever they want. They can say it's going to generate 1 billion kilowatt hours. But we need to test that. And in any democracy, that's how it works. A government puts up their best plan forward, and then it gets debated, and then, people get to ask questions, and there's consultations. And then ideally, at the end of the day, you come out with plans and policies and laws that serve people the best. This government wants to bypass all of that and essentially sort of govern by press release. And this is a great example of why, I don't think people are continuing to give them the same benefit of the doubt because they're developing a pretty bad track record.
Claudia, I appreciate your time.
Thanks so much.
I'm sure we'll chat during the session.
Okay, great.
All right, that's Claudia Chender, the leader of Nova Scotia's NDP. When we come back, we'll continue our focus on the upcoming session with a conversation with the leader of Nova Scotia's Liberal Party, Iain Rankin, your guest after the news. Welcome back. We continue our focus on the upcoming session of the provincial legislature. We just had a conversation with the leader of the NDP. Now we switch the page and we welcome into the show today to give us his perspective on things, the leader of the Liberal Party here in Nova Scotia. That's Iain Rankin. Iain, how are you?
I'm great, Dan. Good afternoon. How are you doing today?
Not too bad. You ready to watch the women's hockey game today?
Yes, if I can find the time, I'll definitely be tuning in.
For sure, and we'll cheer on Blair Turnbull and the rest of them. Iain, I guess let's start with the upcoming session. And and the budget that is attached to that, and the potential here for a deficit into well over $1 billion.
Yeah, and don't forget that every single budget that the Houston government has brought in, what they tabled, was deficits. And because of population growth and transfer payments, by the end of the year, some of those have ended up into a balanced area. But they've never really even tried to live within their means. And now, after successive years of spending over $1 billion of what was originally budgeted, they're finding themselves in a corner that they've really built themselves up. So we expect another big deficit on Monday, and we put forward a number of ideas on how we can try to restrain that overspending. And one of those things is to introduce an independent budget watchdog like Ottawa has, so that we can have more eyes on what's being proposed, what's coming out of the government coffers, and even legislation that's being proposed can be further scrutinized. So we're hoping that they may take us up on that idea, but given the last number of sessions, not as optimistic as we'd hope to be.
Houston government tends to spend outside the lines, right? We've seen a lot of spending that's unbudgeted, and now the government's even having to defend that.
Yeah, the Auditor General has brought that up since 2022, and they have explicitly said they will not change course, even though we're the only province in the country that allows that loophole that government can spend outside of that ordinary process. So we're going into this budget session, and then once the House rises, it'll be back to normal business for this government, and they'll make decisions out of the Premier's office. And that's, I think, the easiest way to find, when people ask where are you going to find savings, well, you can try to keep those departments to what was originally budgeted to and what was agreed upon by elected members, and that they have the majority. So the elected members includes all those Conservative members that sit in the House and have the opportunity to ask questions as well.
New Brunswick tabled their budget earlier this week, Iain, and their finance minister saying they're $1.2 billion, that it is going to be very difficult to bring that balance back to the budget in the next 4 years. Do you think it's the same case here?
Well, I think, first of all, New Brunswick and PEI are in a better fiscal position. So when you have a longer view and you look at a true fiscal plan, you can prepare for a rainy day. We're approaching that now, when there's threats of tariffs, when there's global events happening, then you should have capacity to be able to react. New Brunswick has better capacity. But the debt that's been added is significantly changing opportunities for Nova Scotia, and the credit agency has said that. There's a negative outlook. That's a black mark on our province, trying to find investment from the private sector, and now we have a budget coming up where we know it's going to be a deficit. It's just a matter of how much, and I think Nova Scotians are going to start to see some pain due to a lack of actually managing the finances over the last 5 years.
Nova Scotia Power obviously has been on the minds of many of the people that call this show, and I would imagine people that you've been speaking with across the province. Iain, are you expecting to see any movement on reining in Nova Scotia Power in this session?
We hope so. Every session since the Nova Scotia Power has asked for increases, we've brought forward legislation. We participated in the hearings. We continue to ask for an in-depth review of how the utility operates. We have proposed ideas to allow families to access programs and solar energy. The rebate was cut by this government that would allow more access to those programs and have their own power provided outside of Nova Scotia Power. So we have some more ideas we'll bring forward, and we'll debate them. It is a priority for us to address the rising costs of power and groceries, and the list goes on.
What's number one on your agenda as we get ready to get back to work at the legislature?
Well, I think everything flows back to a strong economy, right? So this government has recently started to talk about the economy because I think they've realized we're, guess what, last in the country. So despite all of that spending, we don't have the outcomes of where we'd like to be. We have a lot of issues we want to talk about, like the child care agreement needs to be fulfilled for parents to be able to enter the workforce. That's actually an economic issue and addressing all the issues related to cost of living. But the foundation of that is a strong economy. So yes, resource development. Yes, we need to look at projects and participate with the federal government. But it's not just that. We have a vibrant tourism sector that we need to support. We have all kinds of positives in this province that, and we need to get our finances in order, and we'll be really pursuing an economic strategy again in this session. And most of the priorities that we are talking about, whether it's childcare, whether it's the pocketbook issues that we spoke about, it relates to growing that strong economy.
After spending some time in the Premier's office in the chair, Iain, I think you have a unique perspective on this. The Premier being criticized for being out of province a lot, for traveling a lot. Does he travel too much?
Well, that's an interesting question. It's not about the travel in itself. I think it's about what has been achieved. Traveling is important for ministers. We've long advocated for relationships to diversify our exports. Nova Scotia really should be one of the main exporters of the country, and looking at Asia and developing seafood markets and all that. So if we can show a return on that investment, and in some case there is, then we support it. We'll ask questions around it this session, but we should be focused on more than the United States. And if we're talking about Wind West, we need to be talking about how that benefits Canada and being able to leverage federal money to build the transmission that's required. And we need to start looking at other partners, and that does require travel at times.
You mentioned Wind West. Stantec coming out with a report this week, Iain, that kind of cuts the numbers of kilowatts that can be generated offshore here in Nova Scotia by a bunch. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it just kind of shows that it's not a short-term relief project for power bills, nor is it something that's going to drive the economy in the short term. But it's something that has been a flashy object for the government to point to in terms of, our economy's not doing so well, but look what we have on the horizon. We need to not just put all our eggs in one basket and look at that. We need to look at ways that we can grow all facets of our economy in all regions. It's important that we ask questions around that we don't end up in a place where we put significant time and public dollars and we have stranded assets out there without markets. Until we have commitment for significant funding in the tunes of multiple billions to build transmission, it's not a real project. So let's stay focused on growing the economy, and we can continue to look at renewable energy, not only offshore but onshore as well. And there's opportunities for that, and that will help power rates as well long term, and not get distracted by just one mega project.
Iain, appreciate the time, and I'm sure we'll chat during the session.
For sure, anytime. Thank you.
Take care. That is Iain Rankin. When we come back, I've been looking forward to this interview all day. A conversation with Canadian rock and roll icon Rik Emmett after the break.
Holds the secret to know it can make
I know there's many of you out there that are listening to me right now of my vintage, or maybe a little older, that are like, oh yeah, I know what that song is. It was a part of a generation, I will say, as was the band that we're going to talk about here in just a few moments' time. It's been a minute since Triumph has been on tour, but lo and behold, here they come. Rock and Roll Machine Reloaded is the name of the tour, and Triumph is getting back on the road after, 3 decades. I am so very happy to welcome our next guest to the program. The fella's voice you heard, guitar player extraordinaire. You've seen him on stage. You've read him in Guitar Player magazine. You've seen some of his cartoons, and I'm a huge fan, and I'm very pleased to welcome Rik Emmett to the show. Rik, how are you?
I'm great, Dan. Thank you for that intro.
Oh, wow. Man, I got to tell you, when this showed up on my list, I was like, really? Rik Emmett? Cool.
Well, it's nice to be, recognized and have people being interested because, for a long time, I was just retired.
Right, retired Rik.
And I was enjoying it. And then, the NHL started using the songs in the playoffs. And when Canada won the Olympic medal, or the game the other day, I think they were playing Never Surrender when they were all celebrating on the ice in the arena. And I just go, those songs, they're yanking me back into reality.
I hear you. I got to tell you, Rik, 1979, I was a little bit younger than I am now. I bought 3 albums that year, right? I bought Kiss Dynasty, I bought Pink Floyd The Wall, and I bought Just a Game.
You have excellent taste, sir.
I appreciate that. So tell me a little bit about how this all came together, Rik. We know that you guys have been off. You've been out of there since, 88? The band has been on hiatus since 93. Tell me how this came together. Was it a conversation over coffee, or how did it work?
Well, I think probably at the base of it was Gil Moore, the drummer from Triumph originally, had always wanted to sort of launch a thing where it would be a really high-level production kind of thing. He was always that kind of guy, the lights and the pyrotechnics and the lasers and all that stuff. Gil was really into that. And so he was talking to people about this kind of technology that's DMX. And people have seen the things that can happen in places like the Sphere in Las Vegas and on screens for big touring shows. And so Gil was really into that, and he was trying to figure out, well, would we do it with holograms of the band, or would, how could we, if we don't tour? And then the NHL started playing the songs, like I said, and things started happening. We got inducted into the Canadian Songwriters Hall of Fame, and so lots of nice things. Well, the documentary had come out and had been on Crave for months, and so there'd been all this stuff that was just kind of, oh, there's another push. Oh, there's another push. Oh, now somebody's poking from the other direction. So then Gil was talking to Vector Management and Jason Murray. Now, he's a Canadian guy, but he handles people like Peter Frampton and Leonard Skinner, and so he came and started talking me into it. Essentially, he was the guy that said, "You can do this. This is great. And it's going to be. We're going to get all these other great musicians to join you on stage." So Todd Kearns and Brent Fitz and Phil X, those 3 guys are going to join us on tour, and they're incredible musicians. They tour with, Slash and Alice Cooper,
Bon Jovi,
Bon Jovi,
right?
yeah, just so many credentials. And I went, well, okay, that seems like a safety net. That if I need to sit down and take a rest, then I got somebody good to fill in for me. So I went, okay, let's go into rehearsal. So that's what we've been doing. And if I survive all this, we start in April. Yikes.
Rik, anybody that's been following you, you guys as long as I have, will know that you guys have, are well renowned for being live and being awesome live. In fact, there's some videos out there from one of your visits here to Halifax, and it was 1987 at the time, the Metro Center, now Scotiabank Center. That is, I watch it all the time.
Well, I'm glad that you do. It was certainly a big thing at the time. 87, I think. Much music was down, and they brought cameras, and we had all this stuff going on. So, we can't wait to come back and play. To be honest, we sort of generated this energy now in rehearsals, and Gil sent me a clip, like a text video thing, where it was. He got all these new drums, and they're all like plexiglass clear, and so him and Brent Fitz were setting up these 2 kits. Like a kid at Christmas again.
Right.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah, no doubt. You said rehearsals have been going. What was the first one like when you all kind of got back together and plugged in and started playing together again? That must have been kind of magical, I would think.
Well, you'd like to think. Great. Honestly, Neil Peart once said, Rush, when they would have long periods of time where they would, be off, and then they would come back and have to get back in harness. And he said, the first rehearsal always sounds like you're just a really bad Rush cover band,
Right.
And in our case, it was Gil and I said, we're so rusty. And before the other guys show up, especially the younger guys, we better get together and just sort of kick each other's butts. So we started doing that. And it was, yeah, I'm glad it was never captured for posterity.
Fair enough, right?
It's a little bit scary. Yeah.
Cool. What can we expect on the Rock and Roll Machine tour? Have you got a set list narrowed down? Do you have some ideas?
Oh yeah, for sure. And it's not just a question of a set list because, of course, it's a large-scale production, so you have to have a script for lighting guys and people that are doing the special effects. And I'm going to have to do pre-record sessions so that there's things that are that happen with the screens. And I don't want to give too much away, but there's things that are going to make a comeback. We used to have a big Triumph sign, and we used to have a laser face guy that would sort of be the MC of the show. Well, all of those things are now going to, take a step up in quality, and you're going to be resurrected. The Reloaded is a pretty cool name for the tour because you are sort of reloading imagery. Like we've had, I think, 3 official logos, and they're going to show up on screens, but they're going to morph and they're going to change and they're going to, all this stuff I was sending a thing to the guy, we're going to do the song Never Surrender. Mm-hmm. And I sent our lighting guy, Paul Dexter, a thing last night. And I said, there's 2 lines of lyric and I want them to come up on the screens when I say them because to me, they speak to the Triumph spirit. Like there's a song, a line at the end of the last verse that says, I've only got one life to live. It's going to be mine.
Yep.
And there's this whole thing of Triumph, which is about sort of self-empowerment and feeling better and hopes and dreams and all of that kind of stuff. And, we weren't like heavy metal threatening, as a band. We were very Canadian, but there was this kind of resolution that we had that was like, no, you have to fight a good fight, and you can't surrender when you do that, which I think is also a very Canadian thing, and it speaks to our sort of, I don't know, I call it the titanium backbone. Like you eventually get down to it, and you're scratching, and you come to the steel, and you go, what is that? You go, well, that's Canadian.
And that was one of the reasons why I bought Just a Game way back when, because you guys were Canadian, and that was very cool because it was, that sphere there wasn't a lot of Canadian bands. There was, you guys in Rush and a few others, and I wore it out, man. I wore the grooves out of that record. That being said, Rik, I know putting something together like this is a big task, but you got 3 pretty talented guys getting back together again. Any chance there's new music coming?
Well, yeah, this is always the standard question in interviews. I'll tell you honestly, I'm not sure about new music because, it's not like when I left Triumph, I didn't make music, make records for a long, long time. But slowly but surely, the world is kind of, we don't really live in a world where people, are interested in records anymore. They people stream things and they might download something, but it's, well, how many streams did you get? It's not necessarily. And in our case, the interest is in catalog that's from a long time ago. So in my mind, I think, well, now, I'm rearranging songs like Hold On and Magic Power and Lay It on the Line and Fight the Good Fight and Never Surrender. And I'm working on Never Surrender here in my own studio, and I go, yeah, we should re-record this because it's going to be different, or at least a live album, there should be something that documents this. And I'm sure there's, minds bigger than mine and people more powerful than me that have already thought of these things, and they go, well, don't mention it to Rik yet. We don't want to overwhelm him.
Well, Rik, I appreciate you spending some time with me. You fulfilled a childhood fantasy today, and I'm eternally grateful for that. The show is here in Halifax on the 28th of April, Moncton on the 29th, and I'll be there, and I know many of us will be there. Rik, all the best on the tour.
Thank you very much, Dan.
That is Rik Emmett from Triumph. Can you believe it? They're coming back. It's been 30 years. Anyway, tickets are on sale for those events, folks. So if you want to catch them here or you want to catch them in Moncton, just log on to the Triumph Music website and you can find all of that information that is available there. And if anybody's as strong a Triumph fan as I am, I think that it's been a no-brainer. I got tickets the first day. Anyway, we're going to wrap it up for the show today. I hope that you enjoyed it. Thanks to all of our guests, including Rik Emmett, for joining us here on the program today. I truly appreciate it. Thanks to all of you for dialing the numbers and joining the show. Tomorrow is the fabulous Friday edition of the program. That means it's Friday Free for All. Looking forward to that. Until then, folks, be well, rock and roll, and be kind to one another.